Welcome to the introduction session on how to use Excel and how to do some basic data analysis using Excel and entering formulas. So what I have here is a very basic Excel worksheet and with some data already entered, and to show you how I got to this point. So I went to Start. Typically your spreadsheet programs might be listed here. It's not, so I'm going to go under my programs and go under Microsoft Office package, and right there open a file with Excel, and so you would get a blank sheet that way. I just went down here, zoomed in a little bit to make it look a little bit bigger for you guys. But there we have it. We have a blank Excel worksheet. And in Apple or Mac computers, you should have a similar situation where you should be able to open some type of a spreadsheet software. So this is like a grid paper. It's almost like one gigantic big table. You have to enter tables in Word. But the nice thing about this one is it's also like it has a built-in calculator, which I'm going to show you those features. So you can actually stay away from the calculator, the external calculators, because there is a built-in calculator here. So let's see how all of that works. First of all, notice that the rows are numbered as 1, 2, 3, etc. The columns are titled as A, B, C, etc. So if I just click on this location right here, and you see the yellow and yellow highlighted, so the location of that cell is C2. That's how you would refer to that cell in the future should you need to use that in your formula. Also, when you click on there, notice that the number also shows up there. So a few other tips: you can basically put your cursor between any two cells. You can enlarge that cell or decrease the width. Same thing with the rows. If you put it just right, you get that little arrows. You can make the for any reason, if you want to put more information, you want a thicker row, you can change the height of the row a little bit. Okay, so for now, we're going to enter some data. So I'm going to put the column heading for E will be the final exam grade for these students. And I just press enter. I'm entering the scores now. And the scores are 80. And every time I press enter, again, it's going down. 90, 62, 80, and 85. These are the final exam scores for these same students. And let's just say that I want to find the average for all the students on test number 1. So I will say average. I'll click in somewhere below the column test 1. And anytime you're entering a formula, you need to press equal sign first. And then the command I want to use is average. And open a parenthesis. You highlight the numbers for which you want to calculate the average. Now, while you're at it, just without doing anything else, just close the parenthesis and press enter. Now, for some reason, this gives you trouble. Sometimes in the beginning, you have to put the parenthesis just at the right moment. If you have any trouble with this, look up here. When I click on the cell, it shows you what's in it. It says equal sign, average, parenthesis, B2 colon B6, close parenthesis. So if you enter that manually in here, I'm going to double click so that formula shows up again. You type average, open parenthesis, B2 colon B6. So it's literally find the average of the numbers that are from B2 all the way down to B6. Again, if it's giving you trouble to do the highlighting option, you can literally enter it, you can spell it out what you want to find the average of. So there's our average. The average on test number 1 for these students was 75.8. Let's find the standard deviation. And once again, I need to start with an equal sign. Again, there's a built-in formula, STDEV. Interesting, it's giving you some extra options in there as well. But standard deviation should be just a plain STDEV and open a parenthesis. And again, I want standard deviation for these numbers. Close the parentheses and press enter. There we have it. Let's say I want to find the median. Again, there should be a special key for that, an equal sign. As you start typing, again, it usually shows up the commands that you can use. Again, I want the median of all of these numbers highlighted. Close parenthesis, press enter. And let's say I want to find coefficient of variation. Coefficient of variation. Now, first of all, when I enter that one, you see what's happening. It's kind of going into the other cell. If I click in the other cell and put anything else, it kind of disappears. So what you can do is you can enlarge that column a little bit so it's wider if you want to do that. There are other ways you can make it wrap around so it doesn't go that far. But let me just clear that 5 at the moment. And there is a formula. I'm not sure if there is a straightforward built-in definition for that in Excel, but we know that this is S over X bar, S over X bar times 100%. So let's enter that as a formula into this cell. So I'm going to just click there and start with, as always, with the equal sign. And the formula should be referred to this cell, S. Standard deviation is in there. The moment I click on it, it says B9 divided by the mean, which was sitting up here. Click on that. And then times is from your keyboard, just a little star above the 7, so Shift 8 gives me that star, so times 100. And then the answer will be given as a percentage. So that's going to be 24.5%. That's the coefficient of variation. And again, you can evaluate all sorts of things, like say you want to do percentage change. Percentage. Now, in this one, of course, it doesn't make any sense to say percentage change, but in your stocks data, you say this is your stock price on day 1, this is your stock price on day 30. So you could calculate percentage change by simply saying equal sign, final amount minus initial amount, all in parentheses, divided by initial amount. That will give you the percentage change of the stocks over that value. Now, let's say that you want to do this for all the other exams as well. Now, you could do the same thing, come here, but put average from here to there, you know, and so forth. You could do that. But an easier way would be you could just highlight these numbers and get the little plus sign. You see how it changes at this right moment. If you just put it in the just right space, the cursor becomes a little black plus sign. Now, hold it down when you get that and drag it all the way here. And it should give us all the other averages and standard deviations as well. And it knows how to do this intelligently. Like if I click right in the cell, let's see which numbers did it use for this average, C2 through C6. So you see C2 through C6. Indeed, that's the column you want for this number, right? And in addition, I want to show you guys a formatting tip. So again, if you check each one of them, it'll show you like this is supposed to be standard deviation for these numbers, right? Click on here, look up there, standard deviation E2 through E6. And this was the E column, so that is also correct, right? Right there. So it's this copy, paste, or drag really works beautifully in Excel. Okay, now I'm going to show you the formatting. I'm going to highlight all of these numbers and do a right click. Go to Format Cells. Click on number, and usually 2 decimals or 1 decimal. Let me just say 1 decimal right now. I'll say OK. So all of them have been formatted to show only 1 decimal. And a few other formatting tips: if you highlight your column, let's say these are this is a table, or maybe this is a table that you want to display in your Word document. Something you can do is you can do a right click. As a matter of fact, let me go to the home. Okay, the home ribbon should show you all the formatting, like bold, centered, etc. But there's a item right here. Let's see, right there, the little grid. And I want to put a border all around. So I'm going to pick all borders around all the cells. Click on that. And you see it kind of gives you a nice display. And later you can copy this whole table if you choose to. You can copy it and then go to Microsoft Word. And then I can just paste it. I'm just going to do a right click, and there's so many paste options these days, but let's just go with one of them. So there we have it. And even when you bring it here, you have a opportunity to adjust the row columns and heights. You can make it a little bit wider so it sits in one row. And if you want to put another column or another row, like I'm going to highlight everything and right click, insert. And I want to insert a row above where I was, and I can come here, like I could say, okay, this is my test number 1 scores, or the averages for test number 1, and if it doesn't fit, I can put the cursor right in between those two cell locations to get it a little bit wider. So you can play with it even after you bring it to your Word document. But one thing you should know is, like, sometimes you want to put it maybe, if you want to center it, just click on this little handle. Like if I, right there's a handle. If you click on that, the whole thing is selected. You can center it in your Word document. So you can do all sorts of things with it. But that's not what we want. Let me just do an undo to get rid of that extra row. Okay, so you can bring things to Word document. You can write things around with it, and then display the information and so forth. So you can easily go between Excel and Word. Okay, let me do escape. Okay, now let's say that I want to calculate the student's average. So I'm going to say here average for the student, and this is going to be a weighted average. Let's say that I want to take 20% of all the exams and 40% of the final. So I could say equal sign. I'm going to point 20 times from the keyboard, and then just come and click on test 1, and then plus point 20 times the next item, plus point 20 times the next test, and the last one plus point 40 times the final. So if I do that, I'll have the weighted average for that student. And again, you can do copy and paste. Just get the little black plus sign and drag it down. That formula will be copied for all the other students. Again, you can click on either cell to make sure it's using the correct values. Like this should be finding the average for Kayla. So you should take Kayla's test. So as you can see, 0.20 times B6, which is Kayla's test 1 score, plus 0.20 times C6, and so forth, and it's evaluating the average for Kayla there. So you can do averages of the columns, you can do averages of the rows, you can do any other types of statistics for rows or columns. Okay, I made a mistake and entered something, so I'm just going to press escape to get out of there. Okay, the other thing I wanted to show you was a little bit about how to do graphs using Excel. But before that, one more formatting tip. Let's say I have a long heading. Let's say heading, a long heading, etc. And it doesn't all fit in. Sometimes one option you have is, I guess in this case it does it automatically. In this version, it kind of spreads over both cells. But to do it officially, you could just highlight both cells together. And right there's an icon that says merge cells. So I can click on that. And now it's merged and centered. So you have your long heading. And if you want to go back and put it the way it was before, click on it again. It works as a toggle. And now it's back into, you have two separate cells again. So it depends. If you want to merge two cells and place one heading over the entire top of a table, let's say you merge everything like that, you have those kinds of formatting options, okay? All right, let's do a few graphs. So first, I want to display the student versus their test number 1 score. And I'm going to do a bar graph, so I'm going to highlight. Okay, let's see how it works with this, because there's no title here, but let's try. So I'm going to go to Insert. All your graphs are under Insert tab. It's going to be a column or sideways, doesn't really matter. A column graph. I just want a simple bar graph for this. Okay, there we have it. It gives me the title of the graph. It takes it from your column heading. And this one here, I really don't need anymore. I have a title for my graph. I will delete. And nicely, the first column displays on the x-axis the name of the students. So this is how student scores were on test number 1. And if you want, you can resize this, get a little arrow on the corner and make it as big as small you want. Click anywhere on the white area. When it's highlighted, you can do a right click, copy it, and then go to your Word document, and you can paste it in there. So ultimately, I'm asking you to turn in a Word document, so you can do that. And here's another little tip. Click on your graph on the white side and do a right click. Let's see. I was looking for formatting, but not the format chart area. Okay, maybe in this format, in this version, maybe I'm not able to do that, because there are ways that you can kind of drag this, put in the middle. Typically in my home version, I can click on it, do a right click, and there's a format option. And then from there, on the top, there are certain tabs. If you pick the right options, it will also give you, choices to put like two next to each other, for instance, two graphs next to each other, and etc. But you may not need any of that. If you want to just center it, obviously that's easy. You can just center your graphs. And if you bring another one, I think it might allow you to put it right next to it if you want to try to save some paper and not to put them one under the other. But anyway, okay, so there is your simple bar graph. Let's do a polygon. Let's show John's test scores. I'm just going to highlight these. I want to see his progress during the semester as a polygon. So I'm going to go to Insert. Let's see. This time I want a scatter plot that's joined with lines. It's going to be this one. And because I didn't have a title, again, I would delete that. Yeah, ordinarily I would want these to be labeled appropriately. It didn't do that this time, but basically this is the test 1 score, this is test 2, test 3, and the final, this is the progression of scores for that student. And if you do a click and a right click, and usually it's going to give you a lot of options to make certain changes. You can change, this is some formatting things you can do. If I click on the bottom axis, I'll say Format Axis. And again, it's giving you some choices there to select from. If you don't like certain values there, I was trying to see if it will allow me to change the titles there. Okay, now if you have a situation like this, sometimes what I do is I'm going to delete this graph. Okay, so I'm going to create here a new area. So if sometimes the graph is not the way you want it to be, sometimes I find it helps to recreate another area. And then I'm going to put the grades there in column format. Let's see if I get any luck here. There. 75 and 80. Yeah, the last one was final, but that's okay. Now, if I highlight these and go back to my Insert, Scatter, with lines. Okay, so I think the reason it's not doing this is because it's accustomed to giving, when you ask for a line graph, it's accustomed to having numbers as the first column, and here the numbers are just quantities that are not numerical, like test 1, test 2, etc. And that's why we're getting it here. But if you were to highlight, so let's say that, for instance, I want to see, is there a correlation between final exam scores and how students fared in the class, the average score of a student? So then I can go ahead and highlight those two and then go to Insert. I want again Scatter, Join with Lines. Yeah, in that situation, I really don't want to join them with lines. Sorry, let me just delete that. And I will go to just Scatter in that situation. Go to Insert, Scatter, just a plain scatter in that case. So this is, like for example, this point right here, this represents the student whose final exam grade was 80 and who got an average in the class of 69.4. So it's plotting those points, and it's plotting basically the x-axis is representing the final exam score and the y-axis is representing the average. And if I click on the Format axis, so again, this was an extra thing because you don't really need a scatter plot on this project, but you can just see there are different types of graphs that you can create. At the moment, I'm going to delete that. And you can also see that sometimes, even though this was not a good example of that, sometimes if you're not getting the graph you want, you can create another little side table like this and then try to graph it. Sometimes that works better. And also, what if two things are not aligned together? Like you want to graph, let's say, test 1 against the average, let's say. In that case, you can hold highlight test one column, hold the control key down, then highlight the other column. Then you can also graph things like that are not on adjacent rows or columns. So I hope that this gave you at least a very basic introduction to using Excel, and that at least it gets you to the point where you can start answering some of the questions on your project. There is a question about a pie chart on the project. Unfortunately, this data is not conducive to creating a pie chart. For that, you need something that gives you a whole. But basically, if you want a pie chart, you would go to Insert, and again, highlight your columns. Let's say you have, your stocks, number one, number two, number three, how much their worth is over here. You would highlight those, and you want to see in a pie chart, which one represents what percent of my whole stock portfolio. And then you would simply go to the pie chart and select that, and that works pretty easily. Let me just do a really quick example here. Stock number one, stock number two, and stock number three. And let's say the price values are right now, this one is 5,200, this one is 6,000, and this one is 3,500. And let's see how my stocks are divided up as a percentage. So highlight it, go to pie chart, let's do a fancy one. Well, that's okay, I'll just do a basic one right now. And here are the results, but that's not good enough. Do a right click, format data series. I want to see the percentages on there. Okay, I'm clicking right on the circular portion. I'm going to go to add data labels. Sorry about the first one. Add data labels. And I don't even want that. I'm just going to, again, right click. So click on the circle somewhere, right click. Format the data labels now. And I want to get rid of the value. I want to see the percentage. So check the percentage and say OK or close. So now we see what percentage each stock represents in my entire portfolio. Again, you can change the size of this, and you can put a title if you like by inserting a text box. And again, you have all sorts of things you can do by doing a right click and going to Format Chart Area. So these are some things that you can use. And once you have the graph that you like, you can click on it, right click, copy and paste into your Word document. So this should give you enough information to get started and hopefully also to complete that project.